Kellyanne Conway staying loyal to the president. Time now for tonight's Power Panel. Fox News contributor Morgan Ortegas, Daily Caller White House correspondent Sagar and Denny, and Democratic strategist Dave Brown. Welcome to all of you. It feels like the Housewives of D.C. kind of situation. I don't know what is going on here. I want to read something because Trace alluded to this, and George Conway was asked, like, are you guys kind of playing both sides so that no matter what happens long term, you guys have, somewhere to go with this? The president's called her husband, Kellyanne Conway's total loser, husband from hell, and whack. So when asked about whether they're kind of playing both sides, George Conway said this to the New York Times: I almost wish that were so. This is just my way of expressing my views. I don't end up getting in arguments at home about it. Morgan, I don't know about you. I would certainly be getting into some arguments about this at home if the president was ripping my husband on Twitter, and vice versa.
It's a little awkward, to say the least, but everyone has their own marriage and the way they do things, and it's different than the way I do mine, but I'm not going to get in the middle of it. I think it is unprecedented, of course, what we're seeing, but that happens often in this administration. And I think this is just sort of a slow news week, and so this is yet another distraction for the media because there's not any policy things to latch onto. So this is what we're focusing on. I actually think Kellyanne really truly has done amazing work on the opioid epidemic, and there's someone close to me who's been dealing with that this week. And so as fun as it is for the media to get on Twitter, I don't think that the average American is focused on this at all. In fact, I think our viewers around the country are focused on what this administration is getting done, and I just hope Kellyanne can keep a clear head and continue her work on the opioid epidemic because it's vitally important and it's serious, and the rest of the stuff is not serious.
Yeah. In the meantime, though, Dave, do you think that there's some part of this couple that they have some kind of understanding privately about this public spat? Because I think it'd be really hard to go home and be in the middle of this thing if you didn't both kind of understand maybe some of this is for show, maybe not.
The
guys don't want to touch this.
I feel so awkward talking about this subject. I don't want to talk about someone else's marriage. I don't know. What I do know is I think that the exchange that I read on Twitter from the president directed to George Conway just is further evidence of how this president debases the office in the way he talks on Twitter. I think we saw that with how he talked about Senator McCain, how to see Senator McCain. So I don't know if they have an arrangement. I don't know what's going on in their home. I hope that, I wish them well. I wish that the president would stop attacking people on Twitter. And I think that Mr. Conway is bringing up some points that he clearly believes are incredibly important, and he's trying to communicate those to the American people.
Yeah, I mean, he brought up something this week that really upset the president. It seemed like, or at least got his attention, Sagar, with this, posting some diagnostic manual descriptions of personality disorders and kind of hinting that this is what the president is. And Kellyanne Conway said about this, but you think he shouldn't respond when somebody, referring to her husband, a non-medical professional, accuses him of having a mental disorder. You think he should just take that sitting down? So she's defending the president's response to her husband's tweet.
She's extremely loyal to her boss, and to her point, I mean, George Conway has been almost displaying some of these characteristics himself, and the level of how much he wants to keep himself in the media with this attention, posting screenshots about narcissistic personality disorder. It's both just they're feeding into a loop which is keeping this going. And like Dave, I don't want to sit here and speculate about somebody's marriage. It feels grimy and it feels gross, and so I'll just stick to the facts we know.
Okay, now I do want to play something. The president, we talked about this today. He went on an important visit today to a manufacturing area in Ohio, a plant there, where he wanted to talk about the importance of what he's done to try to bring these jobs back to the U.S. and to highlight the positive that he's done. But he spent several minutes in this speech going after the late Senator John McCain, and it got a lot of attention. We want to play just some snippets from that.
So I have to be honest, I've never liked him much. He turned it over to the FBI hoping to put me in jeopardy. And that's not the nicest thing to do. He said 2 hours before he was voting to repeal and replace, and he went thumbs down. McCain didn't get the job done for our great vets and the VA. We're in a war in the Middle East that McCain pushed so hard. I wasn't a fan of John McCain.
Sagar, why do you think that he is still so engaged in this feud, even after the senator's death?
Well, what a lot of people don't understand is that the genesis of this is being upset about the role that Senator McCain and his key aides played in the dissemination of the Steele dossier. I would actually, one of the things that some of the advisors to the president are saying are, sir, stop talking about his funeral and attacking him personally so we can talk about the legitimate policy disagreement here, which was the dissemination of the Steele dossier, having key aides, brief reporters, handing those things over to the FBI, and playing a very big role in making sure that that made its way to the FBI. That's the actual disagreement with Senator McCain that the president has right now.
Yeah, and Meghan McCain, who has had to relive a lot of this about her father and his passing, which she's still grieving, she said today that she thinks her dad actually would think it's hilarious that the president is still, making headlines with his name. But quickly, Dave, and then Morgan, I want you to weigh in on this.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think about what President Reagan would say in a situation like this, and I was trying to conceive of any situation where President Reagan would ever talk about a member of the Senate, a public servant, in the way that this president has talked about John McCain, Democrat or Republican. I just don't think it's conceivable. And so, I mean, look, I'll add me to the litany of Isaacson calling it deplorable, Romney calling McCain exemplary. It's a tragedy.
We get a quick comment from Morgan because, yeah, there are a lot of senators out there who are siding with the memory of Senator McCain.
Right, but I think just if you start to look back at the congressional testimony and all of the records that we've seen over the past couple of years as we had this, it looks like the FBI actually had this information of this dossier well before Senator McCain gave it to them. So I would take a little bit of issue with just the record there. It doesn't look like this investigation was predicated upon McCain giving it to him. I think that they had this information for quite some time. In fact, Christopher Steele, rightly or wrongly, probably wrongly, appears to have been a source of them for quite some time. So I think that there's still a lot of unanswered questions here that I think the Senate Judiciary will get to the bottom of.
Yeah, a lot of bad blood between some very prominent Republicans over this. All right, for our panel, thank you very much.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. When the founders of this country designed the American Republic, something we're grateful for, obviously, but not everyone was impressed by it at the time. Much of Europe scoffed at the idea, not just because they were monarchists, though many of them were. Even free-thinking people of the time, contemporary liberals, were worried that it wouldn't work. They didn't think it would. They thought that democracy was an inherently weak system. At some point, they believed, unscrupulous politicians would come to power, change the rules in their favor, and establish a one-party state. What began as government by the people inevitably would become tyranny. That's what they said at the time. It has not happened. For more than 2 centuries, this country has relied on our institutions, our brilliantly designed and remarkably durable institutions, to survive as an intact democracy. And we have, through a civil war, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, 9/11, and more. All of those events put great stress on our system. None of them broke it. Then came 2016. Donald Trump's election has convinced many on the left that our institutions no longer work. They must be torched and replaced by a system that will prevent Trump and anyone like Trump from ever being elected again. That's their goal. And they're starting with the judiciary. At least 4 leading Democratic presidential candidates have suggested packing the Supreme Court of the United States, enlarging its size, adding more Democratic appointees, making it explicitly political, a tool of elected officials rather than an independent branch of government. Here's Elizabeth Warren explaining that changing the court is a form of revenge for the crime of having a Republican president.
First, they steal a Supreme Court seat, then they turn around and change the rules on filibuster on a Supreme Court seat. And so when it swings back around to us, what are we going to do? And my answer on that is all the options are on the table.
Well, apparently Cory Booker got the same talking point. The left is not in charge of everything at the moment. Therefore, the Supreme Court is illegitimate.
Eric Holder, the former AG, is talking about expanding the number of people in the United States Supreme Court beyond 9 to get more progressives on there. Where are you on that?
I think we need to fix the Supreme Court. I think they stole the Supreme Court seat.
Can we keep it at 9? Should we keep it at 9?
I think I would like to start exploring a lot of options, and we should have a national conversation. Term limits for Supreme Court justices might be one thing, to give every president the ability to choose 3.
Every president gets 3 justices. Keep in mind that for a century and a half, the court has been limited to 9 justices, and by the way, it's worked just fine. Some of the court's decisions have been wise, others have been misguided, some have been appalling. But Americans still generally trust that the court is a real institution. It's on the level. And that trust in the court and other institutions keeps this country stable? Would the public still have trust in the court once it becomes an arm of the Democratic Party? Well, the feeling is, who cares what they think? How people feel is not a concern for the Democratic Party right now. They want their power back now and forever. And that's why you're hearing calls to abolish the Electoral College. State by state, Democrats have already been working to circumvent electors and award the presidency to the winner of the national popular vote. Democratic presidential candidates strongly approve.
Getting rid of the Electoral College, is that an idea that you support?
I think there's a lot to that because you had an election in 2016 where the loser got 3 million more votes than the victor. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
We can have national voting, and that means get rid of the Electoral College and everybody.
In fact, the Electoral College does not favor one party or other and hasn't in history. In 2012, for example, it favored the Democrats. If that election had been tied in the popular vote, Barack Obama still would have won. The Electoral College keeps the country from becoming a colony of California, Chicago, and New York. It demonstrates that America is a union of equal states, not a collection of provinces that revolve around a few powerful cities. The Electoral College also discourages the rise of factional parties that dominate only a small portion of the country. We could go on. But the best argument for keeping the Electoral College is pretty simple. For 230 years, it has worked better than any other country's systems in history. But because it didn't help the left win a presidential election 2 years ago, they want it gone forever. And along with it, any restrictions at all on who can vote. Violent felons, illegal aliens, even children. That's the new Democratic coalition, whatever it takes.
I myself have always been for lowering the voting age to 16. I think it's really important to capture kids when they're in high school, when they're interested in all of this, when they're learning about government, to be able to vote.
The Supreme Court, the Electoral College, voting restricted to citizens, burned it all down. What else stands in the way of the left's quest for power? Well, let's see. How about the Senate? Left-wing intellectuals are already arguing the Senate should be abolished. The border? Well, the left is already telling us it's immoral to defend our border. The First and Second Amendments, they hate those. They're speed bumps on the way to total control. They're relics of a less enlightened time. Our newly packed Supreme Court could get rid of them, and maybe they will. But keep in mind, once your institutions have disappeared, it's nearly impossible to rebuild them.